There's another one. Oh my god. Oh my god. Come here. Ah, 4. Come here.
경찰은? Attends, ouais?
Ouais, moi c'est.
Non, là, on peut la manger.
Moi c'est.
Chiot!
Yo!
Pô, onde que tá agora, pô? Ah lá, ó. Ô, Rafa, tá... Ah, essa porra dessa bateria tá acabando, bicho. Caralho, tá descendo, pô!
What the hell is that thing?
Dad.
What is that?
Oh, there's one coming down. One coming down, look.
Yeah, I see that. Something coming down.
The Mexican Air Force has released a video that some of you are going to find difficult to believe. A journalist says it shows images of UFOs tracking a Mexican military plane. He says Mexico's defense secretary gave him the video, which was allegedly taken by the pilot during a patrol. The pilot says up to 16 lights were tracking his aircraft. The Mexican defense secretary says images like these have never been released to the public by the armed forces of any country.
If you flew on Air France from Nice to London on January 28, 1994, your captain says he saw a UFO 1,000 feet long just outside your window.
It seemed to be a huge flying disc.
The now retired pilot is one of 14 men, mainly former government and military officials from 7 different countries, talking about their UFO experiences.
It disappeared in about 10 to 20 seconds.
This conference took place in Washington, and the cast of characters was almost strangely, well, conventional. One of the believers, former governor of Arizona, Fife Symington.
I saw something that defied logic and challenged my reality.
During a visit to Phoenix, Symington described to me what he saw.
If you had been here 10 years ago and standing out here and looking up there at the lights and the view, you would have been astounded. You would have been amazed.
The so-called Phoenix Lights were seen by many people in 1997. Skeptics say they were military aircraft or flares, but not the former governor.
It was probably some form of an alien spacecraft.
Lots of agreement on this panel. This retired Iranian Air Force pilot said he saw a UFO while flying.
It looked similar to a star, but bigger and brighter.
General Parviz Jafari says he tried to fire a missile, but much of his plane became inoperative.
All the instrument was fluctuating, the radio had garbled, even I couldn't have communication with my pilot in my back seat with operating the radar.
So none of your equipment worked, your missiles didn't work. Do you think it's because this was an alien from another world? You're sure of that?
Yeah, I'm sure.
This retired U.S. Air Force sergeant stationed in England said he walked up to a UFO that landed in a forest.
It maneuvered through the trees and shot off at an unbelievable rate of speed.
A man running for president just said he saw a UFO.
I did, and the rest of the account, it was unidentified flying object.
And so did a man who was president.
I and about 25 others saw something in the air that changed colors and was round and came.
Although Jimmy Carter says he doesn't think it was from another planet, most of these people differ on that point and want the FAA to investigate all these claims. But the FAA says that's not its job. We manage the aircraft that we're talking to. UFOs are called UFOs because they're unidentified, and we're not talking to them.
Yesterday in this hour, we told you about the mysterious lights that keep appearing over Lake Erie near Cleveland. Here is some home video of the lights that neighbors in the area say are unlike aircraft or helicopters that fly there. And last night, for the 8th night in a row, they said these lights were back, appearing around 7:30 p.m. and lasting about 2 hours. NASA has a lab in Cleveland called the Glenn Research Center. They test rockets and various aircraft, but say they haven't done any testing this week. A Pentagon official told me the U.S. military has not been testing anything recently in that area. And the FAA acknowledges the light pattern seems different from commercial flight paths in the area. So what on earth is going on?
Had a sighting from a commercial airline pilot who saw 2 UFOs, estimated as being almost a mile long. And this thing was actually tracked on radar. There was a primary radar return. Then a few years before that, we had a case with a UFO flying over 2 military bases in England, seen by numerous police and military witnesses. One of the Air Force officers described this thing as a vast triangular-shaped craft moving from a virtual hover to a speed several times that of a fast jet, just in seconds. And this is an Air Force officer with 8 years' experience talking to me.
That orange object. Look how
beautiful.
Whoa. Oh, my God.
Oh, whoa.
Oh, here they come. There are 2. Look at this, how gorgeous.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so I'm looking with the night scopes. There's no smoke, there's no trails. These are not flares. And
oh my goodness.
Okay, let's welcome them here.
Oh, they're so beautiful.
They're waiting for us to arrive.
Whoa.
Jacques, please photograph. Yeah, all cameras should be filming. So connect to them in your consciousness and invite them here. These are the golden ones I talked about. Let's welcome their beings on board to join us in meditation. So open your heart chakra and send them the beauty of humanity. And if you can see what I'm doing, you can connect with your palms out like this and your third eye and your heart, making like a tetrahedron radiating our pureness and love towards them.
Bob Rosamond has the UFO Research, British UFO Research Association, had many reports over the years about sightings.
We have a substantial archive, actually. We have somewhere in the region of 12 to 15,000 case files going back as far as 1925. So it's quite a substantial amount of documentation, quite possibly more than the ministry itself has.
According to some recent studies, there are sightings of UFOs about every 10 minutes. Now, I realize some of those things, many of them are hoaxes, or swamp gas, or a flux of birds, or Venus, and all that. But let's just say some of them are real. It seems to be like the phenomena is burgeoning. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that the frequency is increasing, and as most people who study this area realize, it's a difficult thing to study because of the confusion, the noise, the hoaxes, and you've got to somehow slice through all of that. But even when you do, you discover there's a core group of things that are not only real, they're classified. Part of the other thing you run into is there's a sector of that that never sees the light of day because of security. And one of the things, because I came out of that world, I spent a good 30 years of my executive career as in the classified community, and not only in the service, but in the intelligence community, and as a chief executive officer of 4 different publicly traded defense contractors. So I'm used to being in the deeply classified world for a lot of reasons. And the point, for reasons I can't go into, but the thing that startled me to discover was that the UFO area enjoys a security classification that's higher than our most sensitive warheads, the W-88 warheads. And so that's the mystery, is why are things like Roswell and other things like that, after over 60 years, still classified to this day. And you can't 2 presidents and 4 congressmen tried to pierce that and couldn't. The security that surrounds that area is astonishing. Why? Nobody knows, because it's classified.
I do hereby affirm
that I will tell the truth.
I will tell the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
To this committee today.
This committee today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There are huge issues here, huge issues. And the American people and the people of the world have a right to know what's going on, because they're part of it. It's not just an isolated thing. And so after confirming the contents of the book with a retired United States Air Force general, I accepted the invitation of Victor Vigiani, who's over here somewhere, and his cohort Mike Bird, to speak to a symposium at the University of Toronto. And I said, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. That gave me the dubious distinction of being the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to say so unequivocally.
I, with my surgical team of medical specialists, performed 16 surgeries for the removal of foreign objects from those individuals who allege alien abduction. The individuals involved in this study all presented with no noted portal of entry for any of the objects that were removed. There was no visible scar formation, and there was no interruption of the integrity of the skin, even when examination was performed with a magnifying loupe, not only examining the area involved, but a large amount of the peripheral area. We used frequencies of ultraviolet light to detect fluorescence in the area of the object. About 60% presented with positive UV light fluorescence with color ranges from pink, green to yellow.
In June of 2001, President Bush came on scene on ABC News, and it was carried throughout the networks and in Popular Mechanics magazine. He had with him a general from the Air Force, and he was announcing that the general was going to be the head of a new military force called the Space Force. And they were going to build this force and also put a military base on the moon. Now, nobody questioned him on why, what was the purpose for that. But then September 11th comes around, the terrorist attack comes, this general is posted as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Space Force never comes about. The question I have still, why did he want to create a new military force for outer space unless there's a threat?
We have one. We have a space. We have a space force. It's in existence, and it's been written about extensively. It's there.
One more observation before I begin what I want to say, and that is that we spent quite a bit of time talking about the 66-year-old cadavers, and I was glad to have Linda this morning finally say that there are live ETs on Earth at this present time, and at least 2 of them probably working with the United States government. The other species that I learned about not too long ago was called the tall whites. And this is when Paula Harris broke the story just a few years ago. And through her good offices, I had the chance to talk for about 3 hours with former Airman Charles Hall and listen to this absolutely fascinating story of how he was working with, first of all, he was scared out of his skin, but after that, when he got to know them, how he was working with, and finally they became to trust each other and have a good working relationship with the tall whites at the gunnery range at Indian Springs in Nevada. And these tall whites were living on United States Air Force property and working in cooperation with the United States Air Force and sharing technology with them.
There are many pieces of evidence that indicate that this is known about, that there was an agency set up by President Truman shortly after the discovery of the crash site at Roswell in 1947 at the Majestic 12 group. And there's been clear testimony that I believe is credible, would be credible in a court of law, that this organization has for various reasons, taken this issue out from under the oversight of our Congress, out from under the control of our executive branch, and has taken this into a realm of semi-private control. And what you'll notice is that as we come to the last panel of our week together here, the issue tends to turn more and more to that issue. What has happened? What has happened to our country when a national security state seems to have arisen to conceal certain types of information from our people, from our congressional representatives, even from some of our presidents?
John Podesta was the key advisor to President Clinton during the Rockefeller Initiative to have Clinton release all the files in the government hands regarding this phenomena. He was a noted X-Files buff. I think that President Obama is well aware there's an extraterrestrial presence. Admitted he was probably tipped off by John Podesta. But he can't do anything about it.
We're talking July 1947. This is what our government knew at that time. The Soviet Union was not going to be our friend. There was an iron curtain over Europe. They were building an atomic bomb. They had the hydrogen bomb secrets, as you could call them. They got them from us and our spies and their own scientists. They had their own German scientists, which they had captured.
Right, World War II, sure.
And many of them were dealing in the rocketry, and they were working on missiles, exactly like we were. And there was a substantial, I think, opinion within the high levels of the military in the United States that another war with the Soviet Union was not only likely, but probable. And obviously it would be nuclear. And so that would be the war to end all wars, finally. That's a pretty big burden to deal with. How are we going to prepare for a possible war? How can we prevent a nuclear war? We don't know. It's 1947. In the middle of that circumstance, they have extraterrestrials to deal with. They don't know where they're from, probably. They don't know what their agenda is. They have actual technology from at least one version of these ETs. They don't know what it represents, what could be done with that. So is anybody going to blame them for saying, look, until we have a better sense of the Soviet situation and a better sense of what this ET thing is about, we just can't just reveal this to the American public? This needs to be a national security matter, fully classified, until we can deal with this. That is not an unreasonable decision.
There are those who are really pushing for disclosure. In other words, they want the governments of the world just to come clean and admit that this phenomenon is real. What do you think about that? And you think this is anytime soon?
First of all, it is real. But secondly, I don't see disclosure in the classic sense happening for this reason. To disclose this dark presence that's been around literally for millennia would trip up the plans of too many world governments, whom I believe to be in league with these intruders. The Bible says that their business, that is the business of the intruders, is to befoul human government. And we find that in the Old Testament, the Prince of Persia and the Prince of Greece.
Does exactly that.
And we find it in the New Testament, principalities, powers, rulers of darkness, interacting with world powers. Now, these world powers are not going to disclose their connection with dark forces because it's to their advantage to keep this all a secret.
My perspective is looking at the ancient text and the prophecies, that Jesus of Nazareth delivered, that I see, in the Apocalypse written by the Apostle John. And, there's a philosophy of history that runs through those texts. And, it kind of tells me what I should be looking for and what I should expect. Now, I don't see anything about benevolent space brothers coming to help me in my spiritual evolution in those predictions, but I do see a prediction of a deception that's unprecedented, that leads the whole world astray. Right. So I'm not saying, my religious belief structure, doesn't mention these beings, therefore they don't exist. That's not my argument. It's not an argument from silence. It's an argument from, what I do believe. And what I do believe tells me to expect this deceptive phenomenon to happen. I think that this alien mythos that's predominant in the culture offers the most explanatory scope for how that could happen.
What do you believe the source of the phenomena is? Who's behind this?
I mean, being an ancient text guy, I have a tendency, I mean, even as a young ufologist, I always call it the Shining One, because that's how Lucifer is referred to in those texts. And when you see these things up close and when they're in full manifestation, the Shining One is exactly a great description of it. I mean, it's brightness that you can't describe, that type of...
There are crafts that are being seen everywhere. So where is this going? I mean, what is the end game here? What do you see happening, let's say, in the not too distant future?
I think that if we have to go by ancient texts, what they're saying is going to happen, what do we have out there that could change the paradigm so much that it could have the church folk and the very elect leave the churches?
Be deceived.
Yeah, the last big paradigm shift was Jesus. Let's face it, he changed the whole operation.
Right.
It has to be something that big, even bigger. The only thing we have sitting out there right now is the UFO alien stuff.
Is there anything so abhorrent, but yet known by a limited number of people in government, military, and intelligence? Limited could be a dozen, hundreds, even thousands. That should appropriately be withheld from the people of the world because it's just too hard to handle.
Could it be that the governments of the world are sort of in over their heads? In other words, they're dealing with these entities which are so much more powerful than they are, that they've lost control of really, of everything in some way.
L.A., I think there's more truth in that than probably either one of us knows. To have made a deal with the devil in the classic sense,
literally,
is to find oneself in a trap. At first, it sounds like maybe you can win in this deal with the devil. Maybe you'll get something out of it that's worthwhile, and then later on you find out that there were parts of the deal you didn't know about at the beginning. And I think that the world governments, our government in particular, has gained a lot of technological savvy from reverse engineering. And we've read about this in I don't know how many books. But what was the price? The price was, I think, to give up certain control on a global basis. We don't know what that control involves, but it probably involves world economies, lines of force, power, human enslavement, and ultimately, in the plan of the Antichrist, who gains his power from on high, the control of the entire population.